The third one here, the presence of non-Johannine words or expression. This one is appalling. This is not a good argument. And I've said this before, right? We've probably seen this argument before when it comes to Mark 16, 9 through 20. Someone may suggest, well, there's this many words in this passage that this is not the way that Mark normally talks. And so Mark 16, 9 through 20 can't be scripture because of this. So I went and I did a tremendous amount of work. Now I'm going to get all nerdy here. So I made this sheet, took more than an hour to key everything in. And what these are, so the lemma is the word that is used by John, and each of these words are only used once in all of the Gospel of John. So I call these John Hapax, okay? I just made that up, John Hapax. Why? Because they may appear in other places in the Bible, but they only appear once in the Gospel of John. Now, I didn't factor in 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. I know it's the same author, Revelation, depending who you ask. I think it's the same author, but it's just weird. So I didn't use those, but specifically I used all of the book of John to determine which words he said in that gospel that he only mentioned once in whatever form it was, right? If you know Greek, a word can appear in many different forms. So it really doesn't matter. I chose the specific lemma, which means regardless of the form. So if it appeared in a first person plural form in one place and then a second person plural form in another place, that would count as two. All right, of the single lemma occurring twice. So again, this list is each lemma occurring only once. Now, you're going to see there are places where it's either highlighted in green or it's highlighted in red. So green represents a place where there are 3 places in the same verse where one of these John Hapax exists. Okay, so in chapter 1, verse 27, the word haxios, worthy, imas, I forget what that is, hipodema, shoe, right, or sandal in this case. These 3 words in a single verse are John Hapax. That's the only place they exist in the Gospel of John, and they're scrunched in to a single verse. Now, again, we have that here, and there's many other places. And then where you see them in red is where there are more than 3 in one verse. These 7 places in a single verse, right? And as far as I understand, this verse is not really contested. So this shows basically that John has in other places in a short span of text used these Hapax words, these John Hapax words, 7 in a single verse. So I went and basically did every single verse and sorted it. Now this is the one in question. Okay, this is chapter 5, verse 3 and 4. Yeah, so these words here are part of the passage in question, right? The part of 5:3b in question. These two are not. These are not in question. Okay, and yet they're still part of this deal. And then of course we have our 4 verses here. So technically this would be 6 verses or 6 words, 6 John Hapax words in this 1.5 verse. Now we've already noted that earlier there was at least one with 7 words. So it's not uncommon. It's not impossible for John to do this. Again, we see that here in the verse beforehand, in chapter 4, verse 52. Again, he has 4 words in a single verse. And in the verse preceding the passage in question, there are at least 3 words which John uses which are not in question. So this looks worse than it is just because the ordering is kind of funky. But you continue on through the book here, and you see them all over the place. In this instance, 2 verses with 6 words close together, 3. These are interesting because they surprised me on the word it is in which John only uses once. So in all of his gospel, right, he uses decapente once, which is 15. And so the question is, are we really going to say to ourselves that because John only uses this word once in his gospel, that he never uses the word 15, that he's never counted to 15. See, this is just the silliness, I think, generally of that argument. Now, don't get me wrong, though. Okay, I'm not accusing the critical text scholars from saying, "Oh, well, it's just a matter of how." I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is by saying, "Well, so many of these occur within this specific variant," then that's a good indicator. But it really isn't, because there are examples in the Gospel of John where more than what are in that variant are available in a text that's not contested. Again, another word that I found kind of interesting that was only used once was Synedrion. That's the Sanhedrin. Coming back here, we have another verse with 5 in there, 2 verses with 6. Again, the list just goes on and on. This is something that happens in the Gospel of John quite regularly. Here's another one. Verse 19 specifically verse 19, for whatever reason, seem to have a lot of these variants, seem to have a lot of these John Hapax in them. So, I mean, if we're going to go back to John 5:4 and say, well, the words are a little bit, John doesn't use these very much, then what do you do with John 19:24 and John 19:29? Again, these are more than likely not contested. So you can't necessarily use the reasoning. This is 2 verses. This is why they're green. And again, near the end, same thing. So, so I think this is objectively, I think this takes the subjectivity out of the question.